Class mods have been a staple in every Borderlands game, often being a nice centerpiece to a build and offering lots of potential for min-maxing. As time's gone on though, class mods throughout their iterations have gotten both better and worse, and with the newest entries in Borderlands 3 and Wonderlands, they're both maybe the best and worst that they've ever been. I want to cover exactly why I think this is the case and my thoughts on what could be done to keep them as a fun, build-defining piece of gear while lowering the frustration that they currently provide while farming. To get us started here, let's talk about numbers and probability, baby, the number one thing that people love listening to white dudes on YouTube talk about. I promise I'll try to keep this brief. In Borderlands 1, class mods were surprisingly deep for being their initial appearance. You had 3 rarities being green, blue, and purple, with each being made up of 4 parts: the body, the material, the right side, and the left side. The body is what would determine the actual type of class mod. This would be the name, the unique bonus, and the skills that it would boost. The material would determine the secondary bonus. For example, on Mordecai's Gunslinger class mod, Material 2 would provide pistol accuracy, while Material 3 would provide pistol ammo regen. Material 1 would always provide no secondary stat regardless of class mod. The right side determines the actual bonus provided to the stat of the material, where the quality is rolled between 1 and 6, with 1 being the lowest and 6 being the best. The left side determines the skill point bonuses, once again rolling from a 1 to 6. A 6 equates to a 4-3-3 skill distribution, while 1 gives a single skill 2 points. The final part to a class mod is the level. However, BL1 class mods are weirdly capped at 55. This means as long as you're max level, any class mod drop should be maxed as well. So if you got the purple class mod you wanted to drop, at minimum you were guaranteed the primary stat and 2 of 3 possible skills with at least 1 point each. Your chance at a god roll is 1 in 108, or a 0.93% chance. Keep in mind, this is assuming the class mod you wanted dropped and excluding the fact that class mods are world drop only and not guaranteed to be purple. Coming to Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel, class mods not quite simplified. This is when legendary and white rarity class mods were introduced. Class mods also now only had 2 parts: the body and what we'll just refer to as the modifier. The body is what determined the name, the skills it would boost, and the stat bonuses it would provide. The modifier would roll between 1 to 5 and determine the quality of your class mod stat boost, with 5 being the best. Rarity would also determine the amount of skills that your class mod could provide points to. White didn't have any, green would provide points into 1, blue 2, purple 3, and legendary was 5 or 6 depending on the mod. The level and rarity of a class mod would also determine the amount of points allotted to these skills, with the max level providing +5 for green, +6 and +5 for blue, +5 +4 +4 for purple, +5 in all for legendary, and +4 in all for the specific Slayer of Terramorphous legendary class mods. The final roll is level, with BL2 having the potential for a class mod to roll 2 levels under even when at OP10. This does affect the provided stat bonuses. So if you're farming a legendary class mod, you were guaranteed all of the related stat boosts and skill points, with a god roll being a pretty reasonable 1 in 15 or a 6.7% chance. That is a massive step up. Now Borderlands 3. All class mods can roll with points into 3 possible skills, with the rarity of the class mod determining both how many total skill points and passive stat bonuses you can roll. For skill points, white gives 1 point, green is 2, blue is 3, and 5 for epic or legendary. For stat bonuses, white and green give 1, blue can give 1 or 2, purple is just 2, and legendary gives 3. Non-legendary class mods do not have any guaranteed stats like previous games, while legendary class mods provide some sort of very impactful effect. This effect is always the same for each specific class mod. This is probably one of the simplest systems to explain, but there's 69 unique passive stat bonuses. That's also not entirely true, as it wouldn't be a Borderlands game without a touch of jank. To explain the probabilities we're about to get, it's important to understand every single skill roll and passive roll works as an individual part. The passives are split into 2 halves, with a legendary class mod rolling 2 primary passives and 1 secondary. The list of secondary passives is 69, while the primary is actually 70, as Molly 1 accuracy is in there twice. For Amara, it's 71, as her legendary class mods can roll nothing as a primary. The skills also work on a part system, meaning each class mod has 15 total parts, with 5 being for each skill. This means with each point rolled into a skill, because there's only a set pool of parts, each subsequent point into that same skill has a lower chance of rolling. If you are farming for a legendary class mod, at minimum you get 5 skill points that are not necessarily in a skill that you want, and 3 passives that are not guaranteed to be worthwhile whatsoever. The only thing that will always stay the same is really the effect itself. This means if you want a single specific roll, you are looking at a 1 in 3,000 800,003 or a 0.03% chance. Just kidding. That's only for getting the skill points where you want them. Tossing passives into the mix, it becomes a 1 in 971,800,830. But bazinga, that's a big fucking number. This is slightly lower for class mods that have skills that can only roll 1 or 3 points into the max, and slightly higher for Amara, but yeah, we have a problem. But hey, at least they always drop at max level though, right? Granted, in BL3, it's not really necessary to have an absolutely perfect roll due to the class mod effect itself generally being what's important. But having points into the skills you want and synergistic passives do make a hell of a difference, and sometimes the skill rolls for things like the Stone or the Infiltrator class mods can make or break them. This level of variance isn't ideal whether or not a god roll is necessary. Every class mod in BL3 does have a dedicated source to farm it from though, which while it can open up room for a perfect drop being rarer, I think this is a bit excessive, but it somehow gets even worse in Wonderlands. Class mods, aka armor, are almost the same as in BL3. A legendary will generally have 3 passives from another big ass list, 5 points distributed between 3 possible skills, and the unique effect. Though new to Wonderlands is that class mods roll class power, with each mod having 2 and being able to roll any 2 of the 7 classes even if you aren't playing them, with there only being an increased chance of rolling your own classes for 1 week every 5 fucking weeks. For some reason, it's tied to a mini event. Wonderlands also has additional tiers to gear that can roll when on the higher chaos levels. But of course, even on the highest chaos level, you can still get lower tiers. Oh, but that's not all, because as the sweet little dingleberry on top of the shit sundae, some of the unique effects that boost specific stats have different possible rolls as well, like the Brutal Stampede that rolls 2 of 6 possible stats to boost with its effect. There's also the abomination that is the Amalgam. I'm not even gonna bother to calculate stats here because I think you get the idea. This really isn't a good trajectory. This is the equivalent of your knife-safe Boeing flight doing a loop-de-loop before dive-bombing straight into the fucking earth. Especially because this insane variance matters so much more in Wonderlands. Wonderlands is pretty much entirely about stat bonuses. A single stat boost can genuinely make or break a build because pretty much everything in this game is stacking stats. This means rolling crazy odds to get your proper class powers, and even just a couple passives or skill points where you want them isn't just a nice boost up, it's the only way to get your build off the ground. Before we get into solutions here though, there is still another half to things I want to talk about, being the differences in functionality between the games. In Borderlands 1 to the pre-sequel, every single rarity of class mod would provide both skills and passive effects, with the rarity just adding more value to the bonuses. For example, Axton's Engineer class mod provides cooldown rate regardless of rarity. Of course, the legendary variant is the best, but not all class mods had a legendary, such as his Grenadier class mod, which despite only going up to purple, still held a lot of value as it provided stats and even a couple of skills that legendary options didn't. While BL2 and the pre-sequel class mods were functionally the same in how they rolled, the legendary Celestial class mods for each Vault Hunter started experimenting with something a little different. More than just stats, the Celestial class mods would provide a unique effect to change up gameplay somewhat when used. For example, the Celestial Doppelganger would improve your weapon's accuracy the longer you fired it, or Aurelia's Celestial Baroness Column that would deal cryo spike damage to melee attackers while your action still was active. These still weren't really anything too game-changing, but they were options that could help you min-max your build a little further, or just provide something more fun to play around. It made these class mods just a little bit more engaging, a little bit more fun, and just added more options. Borderlands 3 and Wonderlands really took that gameplay adjusting concept of the Celestial class mods and absolutely ran with it. While class mods were always a core part to min-maxing, they became not only what can define the playstyle of your build, but even change the functionality of it completely. For example, Amara's Driver class mod, giving her weapon damage based on how fast she's moving, or Flack's Peregrine that drops a grenade when their racks hit an enemy. Modern class mods truly do now modify your class rather than just giving you better SMG damage and a congratulatory slap on the ass. On top of that, Borderlands 3 made it so you no longer needed to have skill points invested into a skill to get those extra points activated. If you have 5 points into a skill from your class mod and have 0 points actually invested into that skill or even that tree, you still get the value out of that skill. While I do think all of this is overall for the better, offering greater build diversity, stronger synergies, and just straight up being more fun, it's not all perfect. There's a good handful of complete failures of class mods. Amara's Elementalist just applying a dot effect to enemies near her phase grasp and not rolling with any worthwhile skills. Flack's Trainer doing pretty much the same thing as their Blue Tree Capstone while not providing any skill rolls unique to it, Zane's critical mass automatically reloading his weapon using ammo from his reserves while giving points into a skill that also does almost that exact same thing in a way that doesn't take up your entire fucking class mod. And Moses, well, okay, most class mods are all good. That's the exception. Whoever designed those class mods, you did good. Gold star. Mwah. There is more to this list, but you get the idea. Not all class mods are created equal, and there's a decent bit of legendary class mods that just don't provide a lot of value. This list can get longer though if you count class mods that have their value tied to skill rolls, like Amara's Golden Rule or Zane's Antifreeze and to a lesser degree the Infiltrator, where these class mods gain a huge amount of their power from rolling the proper skills. I do think the Golden Rule is the single best example of this, as the actual effect of the class mod itself synergizes incredibly well with the skills that it can roll. The effect is that whenever Amara is damaged by an enemy, she gains increased action skill cooldown rate. This effect stacks with each instance of damage that she takes. The biggest issue with this class mod is that it's pure utility and doesn't necessarily provide damage. However, because it can roll Laid Bare, a skill that at 6 out of 3 can give Amara 50% multiplicative damage increase towards enemies hit by her action skill, it becomes incredibly good as you're debuffing those enemies hit by your action skill and you can spam your action skill more. On top of that, it also rolls with Mindfulness, a skill that increases her movement speed when she takes damage, and Helping Hands, a skill that gives her damage resistance for a brief period of time after activating her action skill. Of course, being very synergistic with a class mod that awards taking damage and also helps you cast your action skill. But for this class mod to be worthwhile, you need those 3 points in Laid Bare. When a class mod has most of its usability tied to a really strong skill roll, you're gonna run through a lot of worthless rolls before you get a single one that's good. And when you do get it, odds are it's not gonna have passives that you want. Purples have also totally fallen out of the equation. With the removal of every generic class mod having some sort of passive, the only worthwhile purples are those that roll points into skills that aren't available on a legendary. But even then, unless the skill itself is incredibly strong, most of the time it's not worth losing the value that a lot of the legendary passives provide. It's really hard to say there's any purple class mods that are really worth using over a legendary in BL3. There's a very small handful that are usable and can be built around, but you're gonna just be losing out on one thing or another to use it. So with the good and the bad out of the way, how can class mods be fixed moving into the future? First off, I might immediately lose some people here, but I think the changes to the skill point part of things is good. Jesus fucking Christ, why do so many of you have guns? Listen, hear me out. Having 5 points total, which can be spread out in any distribution of those 3 skills, allows for higher potential to build variety within each individual class mod. A good example of this is Amara's Stone class mod. You can roll 5 more points into Do Harm if you want to max out action skill damage, or get some more generalized value out of your rush stacks from 3 points in Awakening. Both of those options are good for drastically different builds. Allowing for these points to also still provide value whether or not you've already invested into those skills also makes getting a bad skill roll hurt a little less, as at least those points aren't totally going to waste. Especially for class mods that provide a really strong passive effect but weaker skill rolls, you're at least still getting a little something out of those skills. In some cases, there's a few skills where even having 10 out of 5 over 5 out of 5 doesn't really matter, and you can just fill those points out with your class mod only and spend the actual points elsewhere in your tree. As I mentioned earlier, with skill points alone, it is still a 1 in 3003 chance at a specific roll. And while this does sound intimidating, as reference for those of us that have never talked to a woman, that's a higher chance than encountering a shiny Pokemon. It's definitely rare, but personally, I'm okay with it. However, even with this system, that chance could be lowered. The reason it's a 1 in 3003 chance right now is because of the current part system. As I mentioned earlier, each mod generally has 15 total parts related to its skill points. This means with each rolled part, rolling points into that same skill is lower than before. It's a 1 in 3 for the first point, 2 in 7 for the second, and so on until it's down to a 1 in 11 chance to roll that 5th point. If it instead was worked into a system where each point always had a 1 in 3 chance to be any of the 3 skills, then the chance for a single 5-point class mod would be 1 in 243, or a 0.4% chance. Which honestly, assuming that class mods do continue to have dedicated drop sources, personally I think 1 in 243 would be a little too too common. I'm a fucking Borderlands player, man. I could do that in 2 hours and then I'd have to go outside. Fuck that shit. Now, where I hope to reel people back in is by saying that I believe the problem with current class mods is the passives. There's too damn many possible roles, and while haha funny sex number, so many of the passives are absolute shit. But more than that, even if the list was lower, compounding it on top of the need for skill rolls just bumps those chances up to being so much higher than they should be. If there was even just 10 potential passives and you wanted a very specific role, you're already looking at a 1 in 2,162,160 odds. I do not think both of these should exist on the same piece of gear if Gearbox intends for anyone to farm out a single perfect mod within their 3 cosmic lifetimes. Instead, let's actually take something from Wonderlands of all places. Wonderlands introduced a new piece of gear in rings, which really didn't provide anything other than a few additional stats. You could equip 2 at a time and they functioned as a really nice and simple stat buff. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this, but keeping something along these lines in BL4 could allow those passive stats to be split off from class mods and instead thrown onto rings. Well, not actually rings, but something functionally identical that more thematically fits mainline Borderlands. I can't personally think of something, but hey, comment down below. The final thing that I want addressed is the current overshadowing of purple class mods, and real simply, I just think that they should return to having some additional stats tied to them. Keep legendaries as they are, offering those crazy gameplay altering effects that really define a build, while the purples offer additional more generic stats. For example, Amara's Mantis Tom that currently rolls Transcend, a skill that provides a hell of a lot of crit damage, would be really solid for a sniper build if it came with sniper damage and sniper reload speed. Or Moses' Grenadier class mod could provide more grenade capacity and damage. Of course, not every single purple class mod has to be viable at endgame, but at least having them all provide something additional would make a few of them stand out and offer up more options. And more options are always good. So as a quick recap, keep the way current class mods roll skills, split passives off of class mods and onto their own piece of gear, and have legendaries be the gameplay altering effects while purples and other generics have some sort of stat boost to give them some love. But that's just my thoughts and suggestions on the matter. If you've got your own, I'd love to read them down in the comments below. If you like these sorts of discussion videos about Borderlands, then you're in luck because I've got a whole playlist dedicated to them. And if you're looking forward to more, definitely consider leaving a sub because I enjoy making them. And hey, if you think I deserve it, maybe consider leaving a like. Down in the description is a link to my Twitch channel where you can follow to be notified of when I go live, and just below that is a link to my Discord server where you can come and join and hang out. But that's gonna about do it for this one, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.